In this video, I'll show you how to retrieve a record from a backend Dataverse table using JavaScript. So just to give you an example, like this is a model driven app. So I have this model driven app created named as World Airlines Management System. And one of the table which gets shown over here is the airlines table. Now airlines table has a list of airlines, and if I go inside one of the record, I can see some information about the airlines. Right now, what if I want to retrieve a record using JavaScript? Now say if I want to retrieve the name, or maybe I want to retrieve the email or the total staff or the total aircraft. So how do I go ahead and extract those information? So we are going to demonstrate that using JavaScript. Now I've already created a web resource. So web resource does not have anything in it. So it's a JS. So I'm going to write a JS over here, and then I'm going to hook that JS to this form as a part of the event handler. Right. So that's the plan. So let's start writing the JS code. Now here, uh, I have already created a file, some JS code.js. Okay, so I'm going to write JavaScript over here. Now, in order to write the JavaScript, first thing we need to make use of function. So I'll just start writing function. So let me minimize this. Yeah. So let me zoom it a bit. Yeah. So function retrieve record. So we are gonna retrieve a record, and as usual, we're gonna pass the execution context, and we'll open this function over here. So function retrieve record execution context. Now I will make use of a variable called as where form context. So where form context equal to execution context dot get form context. Now I need to get the ID of the record. So where entity ID equal to form context dot data dot entity dot get ID. So this I'm gonna get, and then the next step is to get the, say, maybe entity name. Okay, so where entity name is form context dot data dot entity dot get entity name. Now I've already covered this in one of the video. So with this, what we are actually doing is like we are extracting the entity ID and the entity name from the uh, from the form. Okay, so if you are within a record, so if I am within one of the record, then I'm going to get this information. So let's log this. Okay, console.log entity name and entity ID. So let's run this simple piece of code and see how it works. Okay, so let me format this document, and I'll copy this code. The name of the function is retrieve record. Okay, okay, so copy the code over here in the web resource, save, and once it is saved, let's publish it. Go to the form over here, the event handler. We're going to pass execution context as the first parameter, and then the name of the function is retrieve record. Click on done, save and publish. So on the record load, this handler is gonna, like, say, get executed. So if I'm in airlines over here, and if I navigate to one of the record, then it should give me the corresponding entity name as well as the ID. So the record ID we're going to get. Okay, so if I click over here in Air India, so I should get a JS output on load. Okay, so let me do a hard refresh. Oh, okay, so we have put an alert, so maybe let's do an F12, and over here make sure that you just enable info. So I'll just clear this off, and now if I refresh, so let me refresh this. So I'm getting an entity ID and the entity name. Now look into this entity ID. The entity ID has a curly braces and it is in uppercase, right? So maybe we may need to do some manipulation so that we can get those entity ID correctly and then pass on to get some more information. Now here, what exactly are we doing is we are in one of the record. So this belongs to a table named as G Corp underscore airlines, which is the logical name of the table named as airlines, right? And this ID is the record ID. So if you see this ID E2B199, so this is the record ID. Now if I go into other records, so if I go into say Air New Zealand, then I will get some different ID. So I get 1DB ending with E2, 1DB ending with E2, right? So this is how I am able to extract the information. But our goal is to extract other values like the total staff, total aircraft, or maybe an email if you want to extract this information. So how do we go ahead and do that? Okay, so for that, I told you that this ID will not work for us. We need to do some manipulation on that. So let's go into the code. And here in entity ID, we are getting the curly braces. So we need to get rid of that curly braces. So let me replace the curly braces with blank and replace the ending curly braces with blank. So this will get rid of the curly braces. Now, in order to get into the lowercase, there is a function named as to lowercase. Okay, so let me show you over here. This is how it will look. So what we have done, we have removed the curly braces and we have set converted into lowercase, and that will give you the correct entity ID in the proper format. Now, how do we go ahead and extract the information? So for that, we have a function called as xrm dot web API. So we're going to use web API to retrieve the record. So xrm dot web API dot retrieve record will ask for some parameter. So let me write this retrieve record, and the first parameter is it will ask for the entity name. So I'm going to just pass on the entity name parameter. Then it is going to ask which record ID, and that's the well formatted record ID is entity ID. Then we need to specify the query. Okay, now in the query we need to pass on some parameters. Okay, so how this query looks is in double quotes I'll put a parameter, okay, and I'll say question mark. So we are writing a bit of o data over here. So dollar select equal to something, okay, and I will come to this. So let me close this over here, and then it's a promise. So just say dot then, and then let me write the logic over here. So here we're going to write the function success result, and comma function error, and maybe we can log the error message as well. So let me format this code and show it to you how it looks like. So function success result and function error, and this is how your code will look like. Okay, now here we need to do something, right? So first thing we need to select what information do you want. Okay, so that's the logical name basically. So how do you get the logical name? So first go into your code over here. You can get the logical name by going into the backend Dataverse, or if you have a tool of level of dynamics, you can pick up logical names, and then from here you can extract gcorp underscore email. So let me copy this gcorp underscore total staff. Let me copy this gcorp underscore total aircrafts. Copy this, and gcorp underscore name, which is the name of this particular record. So we have copied 4 different items. So let's go into code over here, and let's say dollar select equal to. So let me copy one by one gcorp underscore name, comma, then let me put total aircrafts, and then total staff and email. So let me see if I can do a word wrap. Okay, so this is my code will look like. So we are passing 4 parameters: name, total aircraft, total staff, and the email address. And once we get all this thing, what we can do in the result, we can either put an alert, or maybe in my case I'll just put console.log. Now I'm gonna say, okay, we are displaying the airline name, and the airline name is result.gcop underscore name. So as the IntelliSense has given me this information, and the aircraft, excuse me. So console.log total aircraft will give you this information, and then we can just write console.log and then get the total staff. So that's the total staff. And also if you want to get into the email, get the email this way. So we are making use of this result object, and the result object will have the information. So if you pass on the logical name, which is gcop underscore name, gcop underscore total aircrafts, result dot gcop underscore total staff, and gcop underscore email, it will give you this information. Now remember, why are we getting this information is because we are explicitly mentioning just retrieve these records. Now if you have other columns, and if you haven't specified over here, you will not be able to get that as an object of result. Okay, so make sure that either you give a complete query or you don't even specify it. Like if you don't specify anything, it will retrieve all the columns. But in our case, we are very much specific, and we said that okay, let's pick up some selective columns. So let's run it and see whether we have written the code correctly or not. Okay, so same step, just do a control C. Okay, so let me show you the complete code again. So there's a lot of spaces over here, so let me get rid of all the spaces, and this is my complete code. This is how the code will look like. So control A, control C, and this time just go over here in the web resource, overwrite, save, and publish the information. And once the information is published, make sure that you go into the model driven app, and in your model driven app, just do a hard refresh, control F5, and make sure that your console log is clear. I'll do a hard refresh, so control F5, and then here you should see the information one by one. Now see over here, what has happened is we have extracted the entity ID and entity name correctly. Now this time we are not getting the curly braces, and we are getting everything in say lowercase, right? So that is good, so we are getting that information. However, the script has some error, so let's see what that error is. So one of the scripts for this record has caused an error. Let's see the details. So it says cannot read properties of undefined retrieve record. So it is not able to retrieve this information. So let's see the code again. So here the code is xml. So what happened over here is, like, when I started writing the code, it was xrm.webapi, but then the IntelliSense has overridden this value. So it is xrm.webapi, the code. So xrm.webapi.retrieveRecord. Okay, and then you get all this thing. So that was a mistake we spotted. So let's see whether this works out correctly or not. Again, go back to your JS, paste the JS, click on save, and publish. And once it is published, clear out the console log and do a control F5. Now once you load, it will start giving you the information. Now as you see over here, this code has run successfully. So we have got an entity ID, we have got an entity name, and it has also retrieved the other record, like the name, the aircraft, the staff, and the info. So if you see over here, info at airindia.com, and total staff 123, aircrafts 234. So we got this information. Similarly, if we go back and go into say another record, if I go into say Air New Zealand, then you will see this information. So they have got 55 aircrafts, 44, 55 staff, and email has come as null because we haven't specified an email. But what if I provide an email? So let me put as some dummy email. So info at airinc.com, and click on save. And now this time I'm gonna do a refresh, and now as you see, I have changed the email, and then it has picked up correctly, and this information is now fetched correctly. So this is how you basically use xrm.webapi.retrieveRecord to retrieve a single row of record. Now, for retrieving a single row of record, we need two things. One is the entity name, the logical name of the entity, and the ID of the record. So the ID of the record is this 1D. Now this one we have already printed in console.log, and then we can extract any information. Okay, so if you want to extract any other column which was not mentioned in the query, yes, you can go ahead and specify the logical name and you can get the result back. So as I mentioned to you over here, if you want to retrieve say more than say 10 records, 10 columns, then you can go ahead and write those 10 columns over here. Or if you do not want to write this query, just don't put anything over here, and then you will be able to retrieve all the columns of that specific table. Again, it depends on how you want to structure the code. But in my case, like if I am just wanting just two or three columns, then I would explicitly mention that. But in your case, like if it's more than say five or six, and there are not much many columns within the table, you can just ignore this part and then don't put any parameters, the third parameter for retrieve record, and then just extract the desired information. So that's it, folks. This is how you basically use Power Apps JavaScript to retrieve a record using Web API. Thanks for watching.